Okay, sentiment analysis video, the 4th of November. You've also noticed that I've sorted the sound out. It took a couple of attempts this morning, but now it's fixed, so that's great. Before it was quite horrible sound quality. So the Australian dollar, US dollar, and I'll go through all the pairs that we talk about on the spreadsheet, and you'll see the stop loss clusters on the tab SLC and size. So that's all on the spreadsheet. So you have those levels there. So I won't need to specify them on the video because you have them already. And I thought what I'd do would be to have a Ichimoku, because it's quite easy to understand, because if price is above the cloud, then it has a bullish bias. If price has below the Kumo cloud, then it's a bearish bias. Now the thing is with the Ichimoku is this trading price. So when it's above the cloud, then it's a bullish indication. When the trailing price is below the cloud, then it's bearish. So when it pops above, then it's bullish. When that trailing price pops below, it's bearish. Pivots there, so we're above the monthly pivot. There's your resistance, monthly, and support. And you see the movement across time and how they sold it. My FX book is actually quite good, because if you see this orange line, then look at price. If I move my mouse, follow the FX book, guys, where are we? So here, follow that line, that price as we go down. There we go. My FX book's selling, and it sort of teetered off a little bit, and they started selling again, and up that goes. So it seems quite good, the MyFX book. They're quite accurate in how counter trend they are. So they're quite good to use, the MyFX book lines, but you'll see that this isn't actually an aggregate of everything. And we'll see it at an average, it's 47%, so it's a buy on the sentiment. So keep an eye on that. And also don't rely necessarily all on MyFX book, because it's just one of several. So this is why we want to use FX SSI. So the euro, similar thing. We have a support bounce on the Kumo, and we see how they sold it, which then in turn pushes price up. Pivot there, we're above the pivot. You see the stop loss cluster, we're close to triggering. Quite large size, but it's not as large as the euro yen, which I'll come to. That's actually huge. So it looks like possibly a trigger and down, but we have to remember 32%. There's a lot of people selling and not that many people buying, so that needs to sort of stabilize. And by doing so, by triggering that stop loss cluster, that'll bring that closer to 50%. I also removed the order book, so we just have a more of a clear layout. It might have been a bit confusing at first, so I'll introduce it over time. But there's your stop loss cluster there, which I have on the spreadsheet. So it's bullish at 32%. Pound. See, we had quite an interesting development with the sentiment. I think this must have been politically driven. No doubt there was something on the news, because it caused everyone to sell the pound USD. And at that moment in time, when everyone sold, good price. I mean, I don't really have to follow my mouse. You can see how negatively correlated it is. The moment they sold, push up, and they held on. As you see, as they hold on, it pushes price up. If they exit, then they wouldn't have done that. Because they're holding on, their stops are getting triggered, and that's easy money for the banks. And I can have an option for historical stop loss clusters, but then again, it makes the chart quite messy. So this is the current stop loss cluster. It's quite tight, which is that's interesting. That's quite large as well. So yeah, just take a note of not to do what the majority do, because the majority sold at that point all at once, and that's easy money for the banks. They would have seen this and they thought, oh great, we'll buy the pound at that moment in time, and they made a few hundred pips on that. So we're above the pivot too, and we've got quite a far way to resistance, but that's a possibility depending on the retail. it might even trigger up there. So yeah, it's tricky. We want bad news, and if we want it to go up, and we want good news if we want it to go down. So you have to think like a contrarian. There was some bad news here, probably something number 10, down the street or something like that, but it caused them to sell. So we want bad news for trading FX. So when we see a data release, you have to remember, where are the retail positioned prior. So yeah, that's that. So that's interesting. So they would have made a lot of money on that. So that's the pound. The Kiwi USD. There's your stop loss clusters there. Again, we're above pivot. So it's looking quite bad for the dollar so far, but we are 62%. So it's not a buy, it's actually a sell. And see how they've actually held their longs. This is the 50% neutral line. So anything above is a sell, anything below is a buy. But we're above the Kumo, but because of this, we'll probably trigger that and then come down. So that's the Kiwi. And there are options I can do with support resistance and things like that, but keep it simple, just the medium volume point. The Euro Yen, this is what I talked about just now. See, there's a huge stop loss cluster up here, which looks likely to trigger. We're above the pivot. To buy, they held short. So again, we look at the MyFX book line. Down they come, sell, 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 up, 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 and they've held on short for so long. So the only reason they were going to exit is for them to get stopped out, and then that brings us to that level, which is 121.50. So up, trigger, down. So yeah, it's quite a cool business really. Pound yen, probably not as actively traded as the Euro Yen. The stop loss clusters are a bit smaller. Teetering on becoming neutral, it's 49%, so I would probably avoid that. So that's the pound yen. It looks like it might break below Kumo, which would be technically bearish. And we have to keep an eye on this trading price too. And when that trading price pops below, then that's like the confirmation of the sell. So, and also what I'll probably do is put a video on how to understand the Ichimoku. There isn't that much really, it's just understanding price where it is with the cloud. See, that's the support, and then active resistance, you see. So that would have been the point where you'd buy. See how much it's come. Yeah, you would have made a lot of money on that move, just on the H4 Ichimoku, had you caught it there. So that's that. So we go to the dollar yen now. It's a sell there. We had some support on the pivot. The stop loss clusters are quite wide. Again, you've got that on the spreadsheet, so you know where to target. MyFX book, they've been quite erratic. So they're starting to go long, which is a bearish indication there. So keep an eye on those guys. Possible come down to here. That's your support one on the month, 106.57. But the stocks are going up, and S&P has got an all-time high. So, and the VIX is falling, so that will help this. We just don't want any bad news, really. So the dollar CAD, sell. We've got some support off the Kumo, some resistance off the pivot. So it's quite erratic, really. So they got chopped up there. They went long. Oh, and this is like the pain train for those guys who went long at that point. At that point, they bought because it crosses the 50% line. And so we follow that and look at price. They held on long, and it comes down. So you see how it works now. And then they gave up, and then price goes up. So it's quite infuriating as an FX trader if you don't know what's going on. So keep an eye on those ratios. But I just, yeah, it's quite disgusting really what they do. As soon as the majority gets screwed, then they push price that they gave up there. Boom, up it goes. So yeah, that's your sell. And the dollar Swiss to sell there, it's quite high. It's 70%, so it's quite bearish. Below the Kumo, below the pivot. The retail guys have bought it, which is a sell for us. There's obviously some support here. Potentially trigger this, the stop loss cluster, and then there's support one there. So all in all, it's pointing quite bearish for the dollar. So everything we've gone through so far is actually negative dollar, apart from the Kiwi. So bear that in mind. So as we think about that with the sentiment of the USD, we come to gold, and that's a buy at 44%. Now we're above the Kumo. We've got a long way to go for that stop loss cluster. We're $7 away. It's possible. Then we're above the pivot as well, so we have to remember that that's your technical bias. We want that below if we're selling gold. We're currently above, and the pivot for November is 14.96. So anything above that, that's a technical buy. Okay. So there's you see some, I guess we could call it supply. Every time it hits, down it comes. This blue line there hits that line, down it comes. It's that blue line, down it comes, and we're actually on. We're teetering on that line now. So I think perhaps up to here, then down. Last but not least, just to talk about oil. I can't show you the sentiment on this because FX SSI only does FX pairs. If you wanted to get the sentiment on this, you'd have to look at the FXCM app, and that's on Twitter, and you can download the terminal. But oil here, I was selling this, and I got out at a loss. It was only a small loss, so that was okay. But I noticed that the sentiment had changed on the FXCM, and I saw the Kumo as well. So that's my sort of exit criteria. Is when the technical and the sentiment aligns, then I'll get out, and if it aligns in the way that I want it to go, then I'll enter. But that was a double disqualification for my long. Was the sentiment with a buy, and then I saw that Kumo breakout. But yeah, so up it comes potentially, but it's a tricky one to say. And also there's all this Middle East stuff going on as well, so it's not an easy one to trade. But currently we're bullish because the trading price is above the Kumo, and current price is above the Kumo too. That wraps up a nearly a 40-minute video. And yeah, so don't forget I've got a week off next week. I've got my 40th birthday and I need to take a break, so I haven't actually had a break since Christmas. Not a proper break. I've had like a day off here and there. I think I had like 2 or 3 days off in a year, so I need some time off. So don't forget on the 10th of November, sorry, the 11th of November, then I'll be away for a week, and I'll come back on the 18th. Hopefully with not too bad a hangover, but I should be okay. And yeah, have a great week, and just let me know if you want any analysis and stuff. I'm here to help you. And if you have any questions, then I'll recommend that you go to the Telegram public channel, because if you have a question, then it will help others, because if it's confusing for you, then it'll be confusing for others. And if I can help everyone at once with one answer, then that'll solve me a lot of hassle. And yeah, have a great week, and yeah, trade safely, and don't risk what you can't afford and stuff, and you'll be fine. All right then, have a good one.